It's time to go beyond the headlines, cause I don't put in overtime just so I can headline. Okay, now it's Fox Sports, I'm live with Renee. Going hard every day, sports rapping every play. Different segments for your favorites, coming at you daily with positive vibes, yeah, we some game changers. Basketball, football, soccer, with different interviews, you never know who may pop up. Listen, only on Beyond the Headlines, this is Beyond the Headlines. Only on Beyond the Headlines, this is Beyond the Headlines. Only on Beyond the Headlines, this is Beyond the Headlines with Renee Washington.
Welcome back to Beyond the Headlines with Renee Washington. Joining me this week to discuss the NBA, specifically the Eastern Conference, we've got Philadelphia Inquirer sports columnist Mike Sielski. Mike, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Renee. I've been looking forward to this.
No problem. This has been long awaited. We tried to have you on the show on my previous podcast, so I'm happy to have you here on the show. I think it's a perfect time to really get into what's going on, especially after the changes we've seen this offseason in the NBA. So focusing on the Sixers, I have seen a lot of discussion around Joel Embiid's health for next year. Obviously, we know he's in the past has struggled with being able to play throughout the regular season, having to sit out a number of games due to injuries. We've seen even his diet being blown up around the world as everyone goes into his or discusses his eating habits. So what have you been seeing around, the Sixers with the focus to key in on having him play more games next year?
Well, I think there's a distinction that has to be made between playing more games and getting the absolute most out of Embiid for as long as they can get that out of him. And, obviously that's a huge reason that they wanted to sign Al Horford and were able to get him. It's not just to play him alongside Embiid, but it's to have him play the five and spell Embiid on the court. So it's a combination of, I think, those two things that you kind of touched on. Number one, it's getting Embiid in better shape. He's reaching the point, I think, in his life and in his career where this should really matter more to him being as great as he can possibly be. I think we take for granted that he would just want to do that, throughout his early years with the Sixers, when if you consider his background and, the fact that he didn't start playing basketball until he was 16 or 17 and had lived in Cameroon for as long as he did, and is kind of just a happy-go-lucky guy by nature, now is the time, especially in the wake of the 7-game loss to Toronto, where he should be saying, okay, now I know what it takes to be absolutely as great as I can be, and I'm ready mentally and from a maturity level to pursue that. And then the other thing is, just generally keeping him in as fresh as they possibly can over the course of the regular season, so that when the playoffs roll around, he is at his absolute best.
Absolutely. I think you touched on a lot of good points, and we saw at moments when Joel Embiid was on the court, he was out of shape. He was wheezing and tired. He wasn't able to get up and down the court. He's a big guy, obviously. And then to add that to the fact that he is constantly battling with injuries and things like that, so he's not able to practice and have as much and have a constant routine with games. So those are factors that have to be, taken into consideration to help make him a better player, because he's very talented. When he's playing at his best, when he's on the floor, the Sixers are a top team in the league. So that's
absolutely,
is a must to address.
No, absolutely. I mean, if you look at their plus minus during the Raptors series, when Embiid was on the floor, even as you rightly point out, when he's dragging himself up and down and fighting gastroenteritis and is not himself, they destroyed the Raptors. It was only when he came off the floor and pick a name, Boban or Mike Scott or whoever had to play the five, Greg Monroe, that the Sixers fell apart. I mean, it became very apparent how important he was to them and how important it was for him to get himself in the kind of physical shape where he could stay on the floor more and be, as we said, as great as he can possibly be.
Without a doubt. And Al Horford, as we mentioned, bringing him in, Kyle O'Quinn, these are guys that are going to add to that depth and allow him to be able to, when he's not on the floor, for the Sixers to still have, of course, they're not Joel Embiid, but they do bring a level, especially Al Horford, to help maintain that inside presence that they need on both ends of the floor. So having him as an addition, Horford, we know the Sixers lose Jimmy Butler to the Heat this year, which changes some things offensively. And that's something that I know has been a question for me. How did the Sixers move forward offensively? Ben Simmons has been working on his jumper. He hopefully will now be a bigger threat from the perimeter. Tobias Harris, obviously, the ability to score, and then Joel Embiid when he's healthy. So what's the Sixers' offense going to look like moving forward, and who do you think really steps up to be the leader, or is it going to be multiple guys?
No, I think it's going to be multiple guys, but I do think you put your finger right on the keys, which are Ben Simmons and his jump shot, and Tobias Harris and his continued development and the responsibility that he's going to have in their offense now. You know, with both Harris and Butler, you had two guys who were fairly similar, and Jimmy obviously had that sort of alpha dog mentality where, you know, when it came down to the fourth quarter or the second half or the final couple of minutes, he was going to take the ball, create his own shot, and try to score. The Sixers very much believe that Harris can be that kind of player, and Harris, I think, wants to be that kind of player. So it's going to be really interesting to see how much they end up leaning on him and whether he can be that guy. I think from a talent standpoint, he's got it in him. I wonder, you know, just if he has that same level of, for lack of a better way of putting it, like that dog mentality that Jimmy Butler has. And as far as, you know, the key to all of this, I think, in an odd way, is Ben Simmons and his jump shot. If he can take and make enough jump shots where an opposing defense has to at least be mindful of him and not get away with playing 4-on-5 in a half-court set, then the Sixers are going to be really, really difficult to beat. You know, Simmons does so many things so well on the court. He's such a fast player. When he gets the ball on a fast break, you know, he can be breathtaking when he's coming down the floor and finding an open man or taking it all the way to the rim. If he can develop any kind of jump shot, boy, they're going to be in really good shape.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, you talk about just being more dangerous and being 4-on-5 offensively. He's someone that now defensively teams they know they can drop off of, just keep him from getting to the basket. You know his game, and you know what to expect, which makes it a lot easier to defend him. So now if he adds that component, and for as talented as he is, he has to develop a jump shot. I know Kobe Bryant had a great quote. He said back during the season, he was like, if Ben Simmons does not develop a jump shot, he's not going to realize how good he could have been until he retires. You know, it's something that with maturity, as you get older, you look back and you're like, God, shoulda, coulda, woulda. If only I had developed a jump shot. So I'm glad he is still so young, and I think that's something a lot of people forget is that this is still a young Sixers group. I mean, Al Horford brings a little more veteran experience, but looking at Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid, these guys are still going through their first, you know, this past playoff run, the year before. This is all still new to them. So it's still very encouraging for that aspect.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I think people forget that it's very difficult for young teams to win in the NBA. I mean, you know, you look at teams that have won championships, it's with guys who have been in the league 5, 6, 7, years, even more than that, you know, and it's not, you know, with the exception of maybe the Oklahoma City Thunder making a run to the finals with Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook and James Harden when they were all babies. It doesn't happen all that often. I do think it's an open question whether Simmons can develop that jump shot, just because I have watched him shoot in practice, and oh boy, I mean, it looks like he's lifting a pickle jar over his head and trying to twist it open. Yeah, I mean, just his elbow flares out, and the form just makes you go, ugh, you know, that's not the way a jump shot's supposed to look. And I think part of his issue that he has to work out is that he's ambidextrous. He can shoot with either his right hand or his left hand, so it's almost as if he doesn't shoot with either hand when he takes a jump shot. You know, the really pretty jump shooters, J.J. Redick, Steph Curry, guys like that, you know, they're right-handed or left-handed, and it comes natural to them. And I think Ben kind of gets caught in between, should I shoot with my right, should I shoot with my left? But again, if he can develop it, you know, boy, then the sky is the limit for the Sixers.
That's an interesting inside scoop that you share, because I actually didn't even think about that. And the fact that his shot is not even natural at all, I mean, I don't know, a part of me kind of thought it was maybe just more mental, and it could be mental, but if he doesn't even have, like, the basic foundation, it sounds like he just really was never taught. And then figure out right hand versus left hand. Wow.
Yeah, and
you've seen that struggle.
Well, I have, and I think part of it comes from for lack of a better way of putting it, his upbringing in the game. Like, I had a long conversation with his father, Dave, who played professionally in Europe and Australia before Game 6 of the Raptors series. And Dave kind of framed this as, look, he's only 21 or 22. He's going to grow. Everybody has to understand that this is going to take time, and it'll be okay. I mean, look at it. He was Rookie of the Year. He's guarding Kawhi Leonard in this series, and Kawhi's the best player in this league. You know, this is amazing that he's doing this at 22, so everybody just kind of relax, and this will take its course. Well, that's great, and I understand why he would say that. But by the same token, the Sixers also have a window open here where they can be terrific. And, you know, if he were to have a jump shot right now, they would absolutely, if they aren't already, be the favorite in the Eastern Conference to get to the finals and maybe win an NBA championship. So there's that push-pull there of how much of the development is going to be natural, how long will it take, how much urgency will he feel to enter this season with a much improved jump shot. You know, I hope for his sake, as you said, referencing that Kobe Bryant quote, I hope for his sake that he is pushing himself to have it at the beginning of the season, because if he doesn't, if he comes back shooting the ball exactly the same way or not shooting it at all as he's been doing the first 2 years, there's going to be a lot of pressure and a lot of negative feedback on him in the Philadelphia market.
Yeah, you know, Philly fans, we're ruthless.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are.
So you mentioned him being able to defend Kawhi. Obviously, this past summer, Kawhi Leonard moved to the Clippers. We know the year before LeBron moved to the Lakers. So looking at the Eastern Conference as a whole, it changes the landscape of kind of the top team in the East. You know, we still have Kyrie now with the Nets. We have Kemba Walker with the Celtics. We have Giannis is still with the Bucks. So how do you think the Sixers, I mean, based on what you've seen, how are they looking in comparison to the other teams in the East for a run at the playoffs this year to not only just make it as far as they did last year, but hopefully go farther?
Well, I think they have to be regarded as a finals favorite. You know, and I think a lot of that comes down to a sort of intangible thing that Elton Brand, their general manager, was trying to create, which is if you happen to see the press conference where they introduced all their new acquisitions from the season, and Tobias Harris was there too because they had signed him to the max extension. You saw veterans, you saw maturity, you saw guys who are terrific in a locker room, and for Brand, that was a key component of what he was looking for. And I think, you know, that gets undersold sometimes in pro sports, but I think it is a significant factor. The fact that Al Horford is there and is an adult in the room, and if Joel Embiid isn't in shape, Horford can kind of elbow him and say, hey, man, come on, get it together. You know, Kyle O'Quinn is that kind of guy. Harris was already here and is that kind of guy. You know, that's one factor. I think, obviously, as you mentioned, the changes in the conference are going to be fascinating to see. I don't see how Milwaukee necessarily got better, you know, losing Malcolm Brogdon. Brooklyn was clearly an up-and-coming team. They gave the Sixers a really good series in the first round. Now they have Kyrie. Eventually they're going to have Durant. What kind of impact does that have this season? You know, we saw what happened last season with Pluston and Kyrie Irving, and, you know, the idea that he comes back healthy and makes a team that probably should have gotten to the finals the year before even better. That storyline did not play out. The Celtics were not better, and Kyrie Irving, as talented as he is, was a big reason why they weren't better. So, you know, does he automatically step in and become a cure-all for everything for the Brooklyn Nets? I don't know. You know, what does Indiana look like? So, you know, I think you have to count the Sixers among the 2 or 3 favorites, 2 or 3 best teams in the East. And I'm higher on them than I think certain people are because of that mix of players and personalities that they have. I mean, they were basically kind of a group of mercenaries last year, bringing in Butler and Harris so late in the game, late in the season, and still getting within one very fortunate shot of moving on to the Eastern Conference Finals. So I think if you're a Sixers fan, you have to feel pretty good about where they are and what kind of team they can be.
Without a doubt. You hit it right on the nail on the coffin. I mean, these are a lot of the changes that happen in the East are still up in the air. You know, Kyrie Irving, Kemba Walker, you still don't really know exactly what they're going to bring to those teams with the Celtics and with the Nets. Of course, the Bucks, as you mentioned, possibly got weaker than they were last year. You know, we just don't know yet. Right. But the Sixers are a team that, you know, they're aside from losing Jimmy Butler, we still know the other pieces in place. You know what Al Horford can bring. And they were 4 bounces away from the Eastern Conference Finals. Last year, the year before, you saw just a little more youth playing to their loss to the Celtics in that round. And so now when you bring in a player like Al Horford, you talk about Tobias Harris, you talk about O'Quinn, these are guys that add to that leadership, which is something that the Sixers definitely have needed. You know, they need someone that's going to be in the locker room or on the court and is going to kind of step up and be the leader and the general, so to speak. So it's an exciting time, I think, for the Sixers. And I know it seems like Philly fans really believe, as you mentioned, that they are definitely a favorite. So who do you predict? It's July, so I'm going to put you on the spot, of course.
Sure.
What are your Eastern? Of course, we have no idea where the seeding, who's going to end up where in the playoffs. But as of today, on paper, who do you think the Sixers, or just in general, who do you think matches up in the Eastern Conference Finals? I'm assuming you have the Sixers there. So who do you have them matching up against?
I do. I have the Sixers and the Celtics. I think, I'm intrigued by the addition of Kemba Walker. I think in an odd way it kind of harkens back to what that Celtics team from a couple of years ago when they had Isaiah Thomas, a small guy who can score, who can get shots when he needs to get shots, and who is not the, how can I kindly put this about Kyrie Irving, who is not the space cadet that Kyrie Irving is.
It's a good way to put it.
Yeah, and I think they had so much going on last season trying to assimilate Gordon Hayward back into the fold, and that not going well because Hayward wasn't quite the same player. I think Brad Stevens is a smart guy who's learned some lessons from what transpired this past season and how things did not go the way they hoped and anticipated they would. I think it's going to be the Sixers and the Celtics at the top of the conference, and boy, that's going to be just an absolutely great matchup, a great rivalry. That's what the NBA wants in a way. I mean, it's really an interesting time, Renee. Usually the league is so top-heavy. You go back over the history of the league, and it's something like, 10 or 11 franchises have won championships over the past 34, 35 years. We see the same teams over and over again because all you need is 1 or 2 transcendent players, and they make all the difference. The Lakers with Kobe and Shaq, the Heat with LeBron and Dwayne Wade, the Warriors with all those guys, etc. This season is going to be more wide open than any I can remember. You've got great players all over the place. I think it's just going to be a terrific year.
Yeah, I'm excited for it. I do think, obviously, the West is still very strong, but I do think that both conferences now have a much more competitive run to whoever ends up in the finals, because you cannot easily look and say this team's definitely going to win it or win it all,
right? Or
win the East or win the West, and that's something that in the past, with the Warriors most recently, with their dynasty prior to losing Durant, prior to Durant and Klay Thompson's injuries in this past playoffs, they were the team that you could say with more confidence they're going to win it all. But now we don't know that, and I do love the Sixers-Celtics potential matchup in the East. Brad Stevens is a tremendous coach. You have Kemba Walker, who I do think is a much less selfish player and a much better leader for the Celtics than what Kyrie was, in addition to players like, as you mentioned, Jason Tatum, Gordon Hayward, Carson Edwards stepping into that, who we don't know how he's going to step into that team, but I'm sure he'll be a great addition, and Jaylen Brown. This is an exciting Celtics team again as of July, so we'll see if they actually live up to that hype. But I'm glad you were able to join the show to weigh in on the East, because I feel like we've been heavily talking about the West, especially once news broke of Russ going to the Rockets and, Paul George and Kawhi going to the Clippers. I feel like everyone's so focused on the West right now that it's time to reel it back in and then look at what the East is doing too. So, Mike, where can people find you on social media? What are your handles?
Oh, sure. Well, you can find me on Twitter at Mike Sielski, MikeSielski. You can also find me on Facebook there as well, and on Instagram, although I don't post a whole lot there because, I don't take nature pictures or, too many selfies. But
you're
if you want to follow me,
you're not, yeah.
Exactly. If you want to follow me there, you can.
Nice. Your Instagram game is getting a lot stronger. I see.
I'm trying. It's not at your level, Renee, but I'm trying.
Oh God, I'm not there yet either. But thank you. So thank you so much for joining us on this show. It's been a pleasure having you here, and I look forward to seeing if your predictions come true, and hopefully having you on the show later this year.
Anytime, Renee. Thanks so much.